Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and I'm speaking to you from the state of South Carolina in the country of United States of America. And my title tonight, as I speak, I feel like it's important that I share this, is what people are not aware of with ham operators in the state of California and what took place last year. And I'm talking about in 2019 and how the state of California treated uh, what we call ham operators or amateur radio operators are those who are still dependent upon by our government for terrible things that take place. For example, what took place in the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana when Katrina came through. It was the only people that the government could trust because they were passing valuable information on what was taking place in that area of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana. And they help people, they warn people. And what do I mean by ham operators or amateur radio? Same thing, just two different words meaning the same synonymous thing. Is that they broadcast. They are usually the people who have what I call a transceiver. A transceiver is two things. It's a transmitter, and the receiver part is there are a receiver. In other words, they receive receptions from other ham operators from distance. They can be clearly received on a radio, a good radio, for thousands of miles, depending on the reception and how the solar flux is having an effect upon the atmosphere here on the planet. And so what takes place is simply is they're able to share and help others. And they're generally at a certain frequencies. Usually early mornings is they're are involved, and actually in the evenings they're involved, which is where usually the frequencies are best for shortwave ham operators because their frequencies are best in that area. But they're all over the place on the frequencies, and there are many ham operators throughout the world. In fact, there are, in the past, I have heard reception reports from Cuba, some places in Brazil, and even in Africa, and actually from Europe with a decent receiver. And I don't transmit. I just simply receive a reception of the report they speak of. So what am I talking about? Why is this important? Well, it's very important. The state of California is come out against these people because of what they did during the fires that took place in 2019. And most people are not even aware of this, that these fires, if it had not been for the ham operators warning others about what was going on, there would be far more loss of life. You see, this is passed along, what I call someone sharing something and passed to another particular person who's a ham operator who has reception of it and passes it along to another person usually. And it's warnings to others. And a lot of times those warnings were given to fire departments to be aware of what was going on. And so what the state of California wants to do is to eliminate these people. They want to hush them up because they're not interested in saving people's lives, you see. They're interested in destroying lives. They may say the opposite, but in reality, it's not what you say, it's your fruits of what you do. And your actions speak much louder than words. And that's what's transpired with what I call ham operators. There's probably, I think, probably 300,000 ham operators here in the United States, and over a million, maybe more than that, 2 million worldwide. It could be even higher than that. There are ham operators in Australia, and they have AM operators in all of Europe, Russia, um, India, naturally the United States, on various islands in the Pacific. This is why it's so key that when Radio Australia, Australia Broadcasting, stopped broadcasting on shortwave, I think it was in 2015 or 2016, they decided it wasn't important anymore. Yet they were responsible in some ways to protect people in the Pacific areas. So the only lone, what I call decent size shortwave station is in New Zealand to warn those in the Pacific Islands about tsunamis, about impending weather that's going to take place. Some of these islands do not have radio as much. When I say radio, they don't have a radio station. They're dependent upon the larger countries to give them weather reports, because many of these islands don't have maybe a couple thousand people living on them, and a lot of them are just on chains of islands, such and such. But that's to do with what I call shortwave communication, which is similar, but it's not the same as ham operators. Ham operators also have what they call a hurricane net, and what that means is hurricane network. And what it does is simply is that they are on those certain frequencies to warn people there's a hurricane coming and where it's at. And people say, well, why can't you just listen to regular radio? Well, a lot of times these ham operators are actually they're not in a big city. They're actually in the rural areas and are more aware of what's going on in rural areas. Just like I said, here in California, many of the areas where the fires took place in California were not in the cities. They were actually in small towns and in rural areas to warn other people in that vicinity. So it's pertinent people understand that the state of California, and I'm going to explain some things, there's what we call repeaters. And what repeaters do is when you send a signal out sometimes, that repeater picks up that signal and then repeats it to somewhere else. Usually it's an antenna up much higher. Usually the emergency people like the fire department in those areas have those repeaters. And so that signal shoots there, and then what it does is it transmits back out a signal, and then someone else repeats it from ham operators, and it goes further on down the line. And that the key is simply people don't understand how shortwave works, and so I'm going to explain it to you in a simplified way. Shortwave is basically on the AM dial, but it's higher frequency. Based upon what we call AM radio, it's based upon 1600 kilohertz, and our 1700 kilohertz is and down all the way down to 540 here in America. Well, what it means simply is their antenna is so high, so the antenna is 540 feet up in the air. Meanwhile, on the upper part of the band, the 1700, that means the antenna the AM is broadcasting on is 1,700 feet in the air, which naturally, the higher it goes, the more expensive to put up that antenna in the past to shoot that signal out. Now, FM is a direct site antenna. It basically shoots a signal a certain area, and it usually can be, peripheral all around. It usually, depending on how much watts it's putting out, let's just say 25,000 watts, a signal will probably have a radius of probably 60 miles to 70 miles, maybe a little bit less than that in that vicinity. And once you get it out of that deal, that circular deal, if it's shooting that signal, then the signal is lost. And they're directed simply, they cannot have so much power anyway, because they would overstep their bounds into the same frequency 100 miles away. So say that the frequency is 96.3 on the FM band. Okay. Well, they're giving so much power, let's say 25,000 watts, and it radiates 60 miles away. Well, with that, with the FM band, that's as far as it can go, because there's another station that's 100 miles away or 125 miles away that's on the same frequency of 96.3. And either one cannot put out so much watts, because basically what happens simply, they would overshoot each other. And what would take place simply is there would be no signal heard on that frequency of 96.3. Well, the way it works on AM is differently. It's line of sight. And if you notice that you go around mountains or you go underneath bridges, you lose the signal with AM. Well, with shortwave, the signals are not done that way. The shortwave signals are shot up into the air. They're shot up in the ionosphere, and they bounce off those clouds up there, or the ionosphere, I should say, and it comes down in a certain place. So the way shortwave works is simply this way. They can beam a signal to a certain area of the world by shooting a signal, say northwest or whatever, and they want to communicate to the people, say in Siberia or in Russia, and saying this is signals from San Francisco. So they'll shoot a northwest signal, shooting out 50,000 watts, or even more than that, some as high as 500,000 watts. And they'll shoot that signal to that area of the world. And that means simply is that station, if it's speaking English, would not be speaking English, but actually is speaking Russian. And to communicate to the people there in that country, part of the country, to what they're reporting news or whatever their programming is. Most of the shortwave stations that are broadcasting here in the United States are, we have basically the Voice of America, which is a government-sponsored news agency by the government of the United States. It has one particular transmitting site, and that is in North Carolina. That's the only particular shortwave facility the United States operates. At one time, there were more than that. I think there were close to 3 or 4 of them, but they've been shut down. One was located in Ohio. One was also located in the area of Southern California many years ago. A lot of these were used during the World War II. Most are not aware of that. That's how the BBC had an enormous impact upon what was taking place in Europe, because their signals were being shot back into Germany, Russia, France, wherever part of Europe. And they were doing it in English, French, German, and such, so that people could hear the news and what was translating, what was taking place, so to speak, with the war going on. So most, with that shortwave deal, such and such, people are not as aware of what's going on and what's happening worldwide. Is that shortwave is not as valid as it used to be, and part of that simply is that many countries, such as Russia, used to do a signal. They used to have their own shortwave facilities and would shoot signals here to America and all over the world. China is the big player now in shortwave. Huge operations with China. And the BBC and probably Voice of America are probably the 3 major ones now. Many it used to be very strongly involved would be Radio France International and Deutsche Welle, which is out of Germany. And then you had some of the Asian countries, such as the Voice of Japan and Voice of Korea and Air India Radio, are still putting out signals, but they're no longer as dominant players as they once were. I can remember listening to shortwave, and I would be able to hear shortwave stations in Africa clearly where I was at, and I only have an antenna up about 20 feet. But I'm kind of digress here, and I want to go back to the whole issue of what is transpiring, because what's happening simply is that everybody's into the internet, and there's nothing wrong with the internet. This stuff simply is that it can be cut easily by the governments. They can close it off and stop it. That's why shortwave is far advantageous to listen to for foreign news, or to have some idea what's going on in the rest of the world. I'm not saying that they tell you the truth the whole time, but if you pay attention well enough, you can figure out some things, what's going on in foreign countries if you want to know about it. Like at one time, Yemen had a shortwave facility. Most of the Middle Eastern countries had a shortwave deal. Very few now actually are involved with shortwave. Saudi Arabia is still involved. Iran is still involved. I'm trying to think of the other country. I can't think of. Egypt is still involved. But Libya used to be involved. They were bombed out, if you recall. But anyway, the point simply is what I'm trying to share with you is that with the internet, it's always all you got to do is cut the wire. I mean, and many countries will do that, and so there won't be a way of actually sharing truth to others. And so, with the move towards this way, and actually young people finding it more advantageous to be involved in the internet, they've forgotten about radio, and radio is still important. And if you're at war, you better have some kind of a way of communicating through radio. In fact, our armed forces still use shortwave radio, very much so. That's how they communicate with each other. That's how they communicate through to submarines. It's actually still through shortwave radio. And that was how war took place. That is, in World War II, that was how we knew what was going on a lot of times, because it was transmitted in codes. And that's how the United States and Britain and other countries broke the codes of Japan and knew what they were talking about and knew that they were listening. Same way with Germany and other countries. And we know that it helped the war effort in that way. That is, being able to steal their codes, because that's what we figured out. And most are not aware that the United States was using a code, but the code was coming actually from Indians. And I'm trying to think of the group that the Indian tribe was, and I can't think of it right off my head here, but they were, I think it's, I want to say Arabic, maybe. It'll come to me. But we were using the Indian language from Indians. The Indians were actually helped out in this whole thing during World War II. And so that's why it was very hard for others to break the code, because it was used from Indian people. And it was a language that was spoken at that time, and Indians had that, and it was simply used to communicate to sailors on the waters, that is the ships and subs, and also to other areas of the world where we were activated with war. Now, the situation with the Californian way it's reacting towards the attitude towards ham operators should be a warning to people that again, they want to control the sources of the media, and they don't want to have what I call bad publicity, and they want to continue to promote their propaganda, as it says. And so it's important for people to have a shortwave radio just for listening and being able to do that. To eventually, if things get worse in this country, then there's a possibility you can still discover what's going on in the outside world if the country has this, as I sense, may fall apart. And it's probably going to fall apart in some ways. I'm not trying to be a negative person, but you have to be aware of these things. So this is what is kind of a telltale red flag to me, is that the state of California, is completely what I call fruits and nuts. I mean, people there are just completely bananas. They don't even know what they're doing anymore. And they're actually, as I read the other day, Proposition 35 or 55, they want to increase taxes again in the state of California. And there's a flux of people leaving the state. They're actually leaving. And most of them are going to, the studies are showing they're going to Idaho, Nevada, and Arizona's been getting a lot of people from California. But a lot of them simply are just moving to get away from that. And so this is what takes place, you see. And I know I was there in California in 2017 and 2018. And I noticed simply is that it's a very liberal state. And its way of thinking is not really on solid ground. But it is the most populated state, close to 40 million people. And I think Texas is the next state behind it. I think it's close to 28 to 29 million people. But anyway, the whole idea of ham radio was in ways to communicate one-to-one with someone in the past. And that was basically how it got started. Yes, there was some radio involved, but amateur radio was right along that time. So when we're basically looking at the days of 1920s when actually radio begins to get solidified, but not until basically to the 30s as being a major media in America. And what's transpired with that is that you had, the radio's been a continual strong point until basically internet has been involved. So it's always been involved, and people still listen to radio day by day. But most of the radio now is no longer, which is another red flag, is that most radio stations are now owned by corporations. It's no longer mom and dad pop shop type of radio stations. That's just about gone. And so all radio stations now in America have the same type of programming, which is, to be honest with you, is boring. It's just boring. They play the same songs over and over, and it's what I call sad to see this, because there's no longer what I call the way of looking at things differently. You see, in other words, being able to share what's going on in the community. That is where the radio station is. In fact, the radio stations get their license from the FCC, the Federal Communications deal. And what they're supposed to do is to be a source for a community, a source for news, weather, what's taking place in the community. And the city I live in, Aiken, at one time had 2 radio stations, but actually had 4 frequencies on the AM/FM band. And so you would get news and have an idea what's going on the political front. You would also know what's going on with sports and also the weather, and also to have public affairs deals. In other words, having talks between each person. And I got a chance to, at a very young age, to spend some time with a DJ at a radio station here in Aiken. Well, both those stations are gone. They were bought out. The frequencies were bought, and they no longer serve the people here. They now are incorporated from the city of Augusta, Georgia, who, even though their antenna site is here in the Aiken County, their facilities are all located in one big building that they broadcast out of 6 or 7 different radio frequencies or more. And this is wrong. This also eliminates what I call competition with advertising, because simply is that they own the area. It used to be you could only have one radio station in a town if you were, you had it. Okay, that's all gone. They can own 5 or 6 radio stations, and they make money at that. And all they do is and there are not many people. There's no longer disc jockeys hardly anymore. So there's no dialogue anymore. It's all a joke. And that's why most young people don't care for it, because it's just boring. And it doesn't really appeal to them anyway. They're far more independent in certain areas with their music, especially it being alternate or indie type of way in a music per se. So, but I'm trying to give you an idea what's happened in the last 25 to 30 years as a major shift is taking place in this country with radio. And the same thing with television. Television is the same way. It's no longer, we have the major networks, but they're the individual stations that are located in certain cities they were given license again from the Federal Communications Center, and they were supposed to broadcast a signal for this general area. So all the television stations are located in Augusta or North Augusta, South Carolina, where they shoot their signals out themselves and and shoot out a TV signal and a different band, that is. And now some of these stations are gone cahoots. That is that in Augusta, for example, and I'm sure in other cities, that one NBC station CBS station and the Fox News Network or Fox Broadcasting are in the same house, the same building. So they're owned by one particular family, or not family, but a company that's dealing with that. So you can see how this is, it's all generated by money. It's not interested in community per se. It's all about the advertisers and doing this and making money off of it. And they can do it cheaper than mom and pop can do it also. And they also can radiate more power per se, because most of these stations have 5 or 6 stations in town, on FM and AM. And what I'm seeing gradually is that the news stations, this is taking place, that the AM stations used to be what they call news talk, still are, but they are gradually moving to an FM band also, so that they can communicate on the FM band too. So simulcast is what they call it. But back, like I said, I've digressed somewhat, but I want to give you somewhat of a history of what radio is. And I would strongly urge you to look into shortwave. I urge you to teach yourself. I don't, ham radio is not that hard to learn. You need to you have to set up your call letters and set yourself up with the FCC to communicate on the ham band. But pretty much you have to share your call letter when you come on the air, say who you are, that type of thing. And you have a dialogue with people. It's just that way. And it works that way. And, sometimes I'll come on here and we'll do this. I'll do a demonstration actually and show you what it's like on the ham radio and see what it's like, because it's different. And they have what they call you have what they call, let's say a frequency is 3850, 3.850 kilohertz, or megahertz, I should say. 3850 kilohertz, and 38.85 is the megahertz. There's an upper sideband and a lower sideband. So they're on both sides of the frequency, you have a sideband. So it's not on the center in the middle, but it's on the side of each in the middle. So it's 3.85 or 3850, meaning they communicate on the upper sideband and they communicate on the lower sideband, but yet they don't hear each other because there's 2 different frequencies, 2 different areas, how to do it. You see, it's part of, also you can think about it as stereo. If you think about it being on the right and left, you type of thing. Well, you're just getting the upper sideband is over here on the right, and the lower sideband is on the left, such and such. So that's how it works, and it's been that way for a long, long time. I think we'll do sometime in the future. I'll do you a demonstration of that, share with you how it works, and how each country has certain frequencies, not frequencies, but has a call letters that discriminate where it's coming from. If you know where it's at, like from the country of Serbia, from the country of Britain or Ireland, you would know immediately before they do the call signs, that you will know where they are calling from, that is communicating from, and you have an idea how far it is. And in ham radio, it could be great distance. It can be from here to France, to Germany, to hear ham operators. Again, based upon the solar activity and how it affects the ionosphere. Sometimes you can receive signals even from far, far away. It just depends. A lot of times the best time of signals for hearing the Pacific is actually in the morning. And hearing the eastern part, that is the Atlantic, it's in the evening. Better signals. So, but I'll show you this in the future. I think it's important that you understand these things so that you can be more educated and be aware. Okay? Thank you for listening, and you have a good night. Take care.